My name is Emily, and for 32 years I believed if I worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, my family would finally see me. But the truth slammed into me one night so brutally I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was my birthday, 32 years old. I had just left the Horizon Brands office after a 14-hour workday. My presentation had gone flawlessly. The client nearly hugged me in gratitude. But as I crossed the marble lobby of my apartment building, heels echoing in the emptiness, I felt nothing. My phone stayed dark, no messages, no calls. Inside the elevator, my reflection stared back at me from the mirrored walls. A woman who had built campaigns worth millions. A senior PR executive with tired eyes and no one waiting to celebrate her. I whispered to myself like a confession, birthdays are for children. But my chest ached because I knew I was lying. When I unlocked my apartment, the lie hit harder. On the coffee table sat the cake I had bought for myself that morning. A single candle unlit, the little soldier waiting for orders that would never come. I dropped my leather bag and kicked off my heels. The silence in my apartment pressed against my ears. The clock ticked closer to midnight. My phone remained stubbornly blank. I opened my laptop, telling myself I'd drown in work until the day was officially over. But instinct betrayed me. I clicked on Facebook. And that's when my breath caught in my throat. There he was, my brother Miles, standing beneath a banner that read, "Congratulations on your promotion." He held a champagne glass arm slung over by our father, pride radiating from his face. My mother beamed on the other side. Around them, aunts, uncles, cousins' faces I hadn't seen in years. Everyone gathered, everyone smiling, everyone celebrating. On my birthday, each photo was another blade cutting deeper, post after post. Dozens of comments praising Miles, calling him the Edwards family legacy. And there it was, the truth I had been denying for decades. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen to celebrate someone else instead. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. No, not cracked. Shifted. A plate of earth beneath my feet, sliding into a new shape. I wasn't invisible because they forgot me. I was invisible because they wanted me that way. The candle on my store-bought cake stayed unlit. And my eyes burned not from tears, but from the spark of something fiercer. This was the night I realized my story had to change. The morning after, I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, replaying the images from Facebook again and again. My brother with his champagne glass, my father glowing with pride, my mother perfect pearls and perfect smile. Everyone celebrating him, no one remembering me. But outside of those walls, I was not invisible. At Horizon Brands, people knew my name. Just 1 month ago, my campaign had boosted a client's revenue by 41%. That kind of leap does not happen often in my industry. Lawrence, our CEO, fought to get me a performance bonus. $82,000. My hard work recognized, rewarded, and recorded in black ink on an official document. Yet when my phone finally lit up with a call, my heart jumped like a child. My mother's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I thought she remembered. She must have remembered. I answered too quickly. "Hello," my voice cracked with hope. Her reply cut sharper than silence. "Emily, darling, I'm glad I caught you. We're planning a little anniversary party for Miles and Jessica next month, and I hoped you could help with the catering. You're so talented with those details." The clock struck midnight as she spoke. My birthday had officially ended. My mother had not called to celebrate me. She had called to recruit free labor for my brother's party. I said quietly but firmly, "Mom, today was my birthday." A pause, then a small gasp, almost surprised. "Oh, honey." With Miles's big promotion, it just slipped our mind. Slipped their mind, again, like it had every year before. I stared at the unopened email still glowing on my laptop screen. The one that confirmed the bonus of $82,000, the largest paycheck I had ever received. And I felt the ground inside me shift again. They could forget my birthday. They could ignore every achievement. But they would not dictate what I did with my success. That night I whispered into the empty room, "I finally understand what matters to this family. It wasn't me. It had never been me. But maybe finally it was time for it to be." I want to pause here for you listening to my story. Before I tell you how deep this neglect went, I need to ask you something important. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever wanted anyone to notice your effort, only to watch them cheer for someone else instead? If you have, then you know the ache that grows year after year. And if you're new here, if you've ever been the forgotten one, I'd love for you to stay. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and subscribe to join this community of people who refuse to stay invisible. Because my story, is not just about pain. It's about drawing the line, saying enough, and reclaiming the power they tried to take away. The next part of my story, it reaches back. To the birthdays spent alone at restaurant tables, to the graduation overshadowed by a wedding announcement, to the countless times I learned that being the other child meant swallowing disappointment whole. And it's time I finally tell it all. When I closed my eyes that night, my mother's words echoed like a curse. It just slipped our mind. But the truth was worse. My existence was never their priority. My achievements never enough to light their pride. So I made a decision. I would no longer measure my worth by their blindness. I would learn to see myself. And that decision would change everything. I wish I could tell you that night was the first time my family forgot me, but it wasn't. It was simply the latest in a long line of erasures that stretched back to childhood. Every skipped birthday, every overshadowed milestone, every casual dismissal they had been training me for decades to expect nothing. And for decades I had complied. I was 11 when I learned what second place felt like in a family of 4. My parents promised to meet me at a small Italian restaurant. I sat at a corner table, the single candle on my cake melting into the frosting. Waiters circled pity in their eyes. I kept glancing toward the door, rehearsing the smile I would give them when they finally rushed in. But they never came back. Miles had a debate competition that ran long. He won. They took him out to celebrate. I ate my birthday pasta alone. At 17, history repeated itself. My birthday weekend arrived, but I wasn't home. I was at Grandma's house, shuttled there like baggage. My parents were walking Yale's campus with Miles. It's his future, Dad explained later, his eyes fixed anywhere but mine. You'll understand one day. I did understand, just not in the way he imagined. I understood that my birthdays were optional. His milestones were mandatory. And then at 22, I graduated summa cum laude, top of my class. My professors shook my hand with pride. My friends threw confetti. But that night at the dinner meant to celebrate me. Miles stood up, cleared his throat, and announced his engagement. Within minutes, the room pulsed with chatter about wedding venues and floral arrangements. My diploma sat untouched beside the breadbasket. I don't remember anyone even asking what came next for me. Each time I told myself not to make a fuss. I smiled tightly. I swallowed the ache. I learned to disappear in plain sight, because to protest would be to risk losing even the crumbs of approval they occasionally tossed my way. Looking back now, it almost feels absurd how many times I allowed them to convince me that being forgotten was normal. But when you're raised in a family that equates love with hierarchy, you adapt. You become invisible. And even last year, after my campaign drove revenue up 41%, Dad barely looked up from his watch. It's just advertising. He said, dismissing millions in client growth with 3 words. Not like Miles's work in finance. That's real impact. The words stung because they were familiar. Every achievement of mine had always been not like his. So when Mom claimed she forgot my birthday because of Miles's promotion, I didn't just hear one slip. I heard the chorus of every forgotten year echoing behind it. A chorus telling me I would never measure up. But this time I wasn't 11 waiting at a restaurant table. I wasn't 17 packed off to Grandma's. I wasn't 22 clutching a diploma no one cared about. I was 32 holding an $82,000 bonus, and the knowledge that my value didn't require their recognition. Let me ask you something, because I know I'm not alone here. Have you ever been in a room full of people who should have celebrated you only to realize every word, every glance, every clap was meant for someone else? If you have, tell me in the comments how you handled it. Did you stay silent or did you speak up? Because here's what I need you to know. Silence has a cost. Every time I swallowed the ache, it calcified into something heavier. Something that told me I didn't deserve to be seen. That weight stayed with me for years, but that night staring at my mother's casual cruelty, I felt it begin to lift. Slowly, stubbornly, but unmistakably. The truth is, the first step to reclaiming yourself isn't confrontation. It's acknowledgement. Acknowledging that you were wronged. Acknowledging that the story you were handed doesn't have to be the story you keep living. And as painful as it was to sift through those memories, that acknowledgement planted the seed. The seed of a boundary I had never dared to imagine before. I didn't know it yet, but the next time my family asked for something, I would finally say no. At work, I was celebrated. At home, I was invisible. That contrast grew sharper with every passing year, and by 32, it was impossible to ignore. When the Horizon campaign results came in, the numbers stunned even our board, a 41% increase in quarterly revenue. My CEO, Lawrence Chen, walked into my office with a folder in hand and pride in his eyes. "Emily, this is why I fought for your bonus. $82,000. You earned every penny." His words wrapped around me like sunlight after a storm. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe the truth. I was good at what I did. More than good. But then I heard my father's voice echo from memory. "It's just advertising." That's what he had said when I told him about the campaign. Not like Miles's work in finance. That's the real impact. Just advertising. 2 words that stripped away years of late nights, endless revisions, client battles fought and won. 2 words that reduced my life's work to a hobby. And yet those 2 words defined the way my family measured me. I began to realize that every dismissal, every brush-off was not random. It was systematic. They needed Miles to be the sun, and for that to happen, I had to remain in shadow. If I grew too bright, if I succeeded too loudly, it threatened the fragile story they told themselves, that he was the legacy and I was extra. The truth is my success scared them, because it proved their narrative wrong. I thought about all the times Dad introduced me to his friends. He would say, "This is my daughter Emily. She works in PR." And then his tone would shift, chest swelling with pride, as he added, "And this is my son Miles. He's in finance." People would nod, impressed. They never asked me another question. At first I thought it was my fault. Maybe I wasn't interesting enough. Maybe I talked too much about marketing jargon people didn't understand. But then when Lawrence handed me that bonus letter and shook my hand in front of the board, I realized the truth. The problem wasn't my work. The problem was that they had decided it would never be enough. Do you know what it feels like to fight so hard for recognition, only to realize the people you're fighting for never intended to give it? It's like running a marathon toward a finish line that keeps moving farther away. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop. My inbox held congratulatory messages from colleagues, clients, even executives I barely knew. People who saw my value. People who wrote, "We couldn't have done this without you." Then I opened my family group thread. Dozens of messages about Miles. Photos of him with clients, stories about his latest deal, praise for his dedication, not one word about me. I remember closing my eyes, my hands trembling with both rage and clarity. I finally understood something I had never dared to admit before. My family didn't just undervalue me, they erased me, and I thought maybe it was time I stopped begging for their approval. At this point, I need to ask you directly. Have you ever had your achievements dismissed with a wave of the hand, like they were nothing? Have you ever been told your hard work didn't count because it didn't match someone else's version of success? If you have, you know the fury that burns in your chest. You know the temptation to keep proving yourself until they finally see you. But let me share something I learned. No amount of proof will ever be enough for people who are determined not to see you. That realization scared me, but it also freed me. Because if I could stop trying to earn their recognition, maybe I could start building something for myself. And the opportunity to test that theory was about to come sooner than I expected. In a family group chat one I wasn't even meant to see, I discovered just how little they valued me and just how much they wanted from me. The next chapter of this story isn't about dismissal, it's about betrayal, and it would change everything. The email notification appeared on my screen late one afternoon. I almost ignored it, just another message among hundreds. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. By mistake, my mother had added me to a group chat I wasn't supposed to see, a digital back room where my family plotted without me. I scrolled each line a dagger. Emily should contribute significantly to Miles and Jessica's anniversary gift, my father wrote. At least 20,000. My mother's reply followed almost instantly. She just got that bonus. It's time she supports the family for once. The words blurred as my eyes stung. For once. Had they already forgotten every holiday where I covered expenses? The countless times I bought gifts, arranged events, filled in the gaps for once. And then came the insult that cut deeper than the demand itself. My own mother spelled my name wrong, one M, one L, as if I was a stranger. It was all there written plainly. My worth to them wasn't measured in love, pride, or even acknowledgement. It was measured in dollars. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under me, the Chicago skyline glittering cold beyond the window. My hands shook, not from sadness anymore, but from fury. They wanted $20,000 of the $82,000 I had earned. A quarter of my success, siphoned straight into celebrating my brother again. Jennifer, my colleague and closest friend, walked in just then. She caught my expression, frowned, and asked, "Everything okay?" Wordlessly, I turned the laptop toward her. She read the thread, her frown deepening with every line. "This is the third time he's used your contacts, and now they want 20,000 too." She let out a low whistle. "That's messed up, Emily." Her bluntness cut through the fog. For years, I'd let my family decide the terms of my existence. But sitting there listening to Jennifer name it plainly, something hardened inside me. I thought back to Lawrence handing me that bonus letter, to the board praising my campaign, to every email congratulating me for saving accounts worth millions. And then I thought of my father's words, "It's just advertising." No more. That night I sat with Mrs. Bennett, my 84-year-old neighbor, over her oatmeal cookies. She listened quietly as I told her about the messages, about the money, about the misspelled name. Finally, she placed her wrinkled hand over mine and said, "Some parents never see their children clearly, too busy looking at their own reflection." Her words sank deep. Maybe my family never would see me clearly. Maybe they didn't want to. I looked around her cozy kitchen, the checkered tablecloth, the smell of cookies still warm from the oven. Mrs. Bennett wasn't my blood, but in that moment, she was more family than anyone who shared my DNA. And it hit me, I had spent my life waiting for recognition from people who would never give it. Maybe it was time to stop waiting. Before I continue, let me whisper something to you, right where you are. If you've ever had your family reduce you to nothing more than a paycheck, if you've ever felt your worth calculated in dollars instead of love, stay with me. Hit that subscribe button because you and I, we share a bond. We know what it means to be used instead of cherished. And this story isn't finished. The decision I made next would shake my family in ways they never expected. Because when my father demanded $20,000 at the next family dinner, I finally told him no. And the silence that followed was louder than any applause I had ever dreamed of. The Monday after discovering that group chat, I walked into Horizon's glass-walled office building with a weight on my chest. But I wasn't walking in alone. Jennifer was waiting at the elevator, her curls bouncing as she waved. She could read me better than anyone. "You didn't sleep?" she said flatly, eyes narrowing. I shook my head. I read the messages again. She didn't need to ask which messages. She had seen the worst of them already, the demand for $20,000, the way my mother spelled my name wrong. By the time we reached our floor, Jennifer squeezed my arm. "Remember this? You're not crazy. They're asking too much. They always have." Her voice steadied me. Because at Horizon, my reality was validated. Just that morning, Lawrence stopped me in the hallway. "Emily," he said, his hand resting on a folder the Westfield campaign just closed with a 41% revenue jump. "The board is ecstatic. I'm proud of you." His words were simple, but they pierced like light through fog. Here was a man who measured me not against my brother, not against anyone else, but against results I had delivered. He fought for my bonus, not because I was someone's daughter, but because I earned it. Contrast that with my father's voice, "It's just advertising." That dismissal had once crushed me. But standing there hearing my CEO recognize my talent, I realized something crucial. My family's blindness didn't make me less valuable. It only revealed their refusal to see. That night I knocked on Mrs. Bennett's door. As always, she greeted me with cookies and tea. We sat at her small kitchen table, the checkered cloth soft under my fingers. For 3 years, Tuesday dinners with her had been my ritual. She was the one who asked about my work, my dreams, my health. "You look troubled," she said, passing me a cookie. I told her about the group chat, about my parents' demand, about the wrong spelling of my name. I expected her to brush it off with a kind smile. Instead, she squeezed my hand and said, "Emily, sometimes we wait decades for our parents to see us. And sometimes they never will. That's their blindness, not your worth." Her words lingered long after I left her apartment. For the first time, I considered a radical possibility. Maybe I didn't need their recognition at all. Let me pause here because I know some of you listening need to hear this. Have you ever found family in someone who wasn't related to you? Someone who showed up when your blood relatives didn't share it in the comments, because those stories matter. They remind us we can choose who our family really is. Jennifer Lawrence, Mrs. Bennett, they were my proof. Proof that I was not invisible. Proof that I was worth more than the scraps of validation my parents dangled over me. But even with their support, I knew a confrontation was coming. I could feel it in my bones. My family wasn't going to let go of $20,000 without a fight. And when that fight arrived, it wouldn't be in whispers or texts. It would be face to face. I didn't know it yet, but the stage was already set. A dinner invitation was waiting. A dinner where my father would demand, my mother would cry, and my brother would watch in silence. And for the first time in my life, I would not fold. I would say no, and everything would change. The invitation arrived with no warmth, no celebration, only expectation. Saturday evening at the Edwards Mansion, dinner at 7, no reason given, but I didn't need one. I already knew. The mansion loomed over Lakeshore Drive like a monument to power, 3 stories of stone and privilege. As I walked up the steps, my pulse hammered against my ribs. I had attended countless dinners here before, each one choreographed around Miles. But tonight would be different. Tonight I would not play my part. Inside, my mother fussed over flowers, pearls gleaming under the chandelier. My father poured himself a scotch, his presence commanding the room even in silence. Miles and Jessica sat on the leather sofa, perfect as ever, like they had stepped out of a glossy magazine. I took my seat at the dining table, pushing salmon around my plate as conversation flowed, the same way it always did. Miles's successes, Miles's promotions, Miles's endless accolades. Then dessert arrived, and so did the moment. My father set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision, his eyes locking onto mine. "Emily, we need to discuss your contribution to Miles and Jessica's anniversary celebration. 20,000 should cover the venue and catering. As the only one with a recent windfall, it's appropriate." The air thickened. My mother nodded quickly, her pearl earrings catching the candlelight. Family supports, family darling. Those words, family supports, family, snapped something inside me. I thought of every birthday spent alone, every achievement dismissed, every call that never came. When exactly had they supported me? I placed my fork down, hands steady, despite the storm inside me. "I can't," I said softly. My father blinked, uncomprehending. "I beg your pardon." "I can't contribute $20,000, I repeated, voice firmer now. "That's a quarter of my bonus. I have other plans." The silence was heavy, unnatural. No one at this table was used to hearing me refuse. "What other plans could possibly take precedence over your brother's celebration?" my father asked, his voice dropping dangerously low. "My future," I answered simply. My mother's face crumpled into rehearsed sorrow. Tears glistened in her eyes. "After all we've done for you," she whispered. Her performance flawless, designed to draw guilt like blood. But the words slipped out of me before I could stop them. "What exactly have you done for me?" My father surged to his feet, towering over the table. "I will not tolerate ingratitude in this house. Your brother is the true achiever in this family. The least you can do is support his success." His words struck precisely where they always had, into the bruise of being less than. But this time I did not collapse beneath the blow. My legs trembled, but I stood. "I need to go," I said, reaching for my purse. My mother grasped my arm, desperation in her touch. "Emily, please don't make a scene." But I didn't retreat into silence. I didn't smooth over the edges. For the first time in my life, I walked out the front door with their disappointment trailing behind me like a shadow. And with that shadow came something new: resolution. In the car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I realized what I had just done. I had said no, out loud, to my father's face, to my mother's tears, to the entire system that had kept me small for 32 years. It was terrifying. It was liberating. Now I want to turn to you. If you were in my seat that night, if your family demanded a quarter of your hard-earned money for someone else's celebration, what would you have done? Would you have paid for peace, or would you have walked out? Tell me, because those choices reveal who we become. For me, that night was only the beginning. My no was a crack in the foundation, and my family, furious at being defied, would not let it stand. The next confrontation would not happen in whispers or behind closed doors. It would happen in the very place they believed I didn't belong, my workplace. And I was ready. The fallout from that dinner didn't take long. My phone buzzed with missed calls before I even reached my apartment. My mother left voicemails drenched in guilt, each one a variation of the same theme. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. How could you embarrass us like this? I ignored them. But ignoring my father, that wasn't an option he would allow. 3 days later, the glass doors of Horizon PR swung open, and in walked Richard Edwards. My father, 6'2", silver hair combed back with military precision, his custom-tailored suit cutting through the hum of the office. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Colleagues looked up from their desks. Even the receptionist froze. Jennifer spotted him before I did. She mouthed code red from across the floor and disappeared into a conference room. I intercepted him near reception, forcing a smile. Dad, this is my workplace. One, he snapped, his voice cutting through the open office like a whip. Then conduct yourself like a professional. Professionals honor their family obligations. My cheeks burned as nearby heads turned. I gestured toward an empty meeting room, praying to drag this circus behind a closed door. Once inside, I lowered my voice. What do you want? Your mother hasn't slept since that dinner, he said, checking his watch. She cries every night. Is that what you wanted, to punish us because we missed one birthday? The dismissal ignited something molten inside me. One. My voice shook, not from fear but from fury. Try 20 years of birthdays. Try graduations ignored, achievements brushed aside. Don't you dare reduce this to one night. You exaggerate, he scoffed. The point is, Miles deserves our support. 20,000 from your bonus is fair. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed with an emergency alert from one of our biggest clients. A brewing crisis threatened to unravel millions in contracts. My priorities snapped into focus. I have to handle this, I said, standing. This conversation isn't finished, he warned, voice low with menace. But I had already opened the door. Actually, it is. I walked away on trembling legs, but for the first time, my voice had been steady. I chose my career, my responsibility over his demands. And within 3 hours, I proved exactly why that choice mattered. I stood before our executive team, presenting a crisis management strategy that saved the Westridge account. My voice never wavered. By the time I finished, the CEO clasped my shoulder. That was extraordinary, Emily. You just saved a $3 million account. The client called me personally to sing your praises. Pride warmed me from the inside out, so foreign it almost felt like guilt. Because outside these walls, my phone lit up with Miles's name over and over. His messages came fast. Mom's crying every night because of you. Fix this. Fix. As if my existence was the problem. As if my resistance was a flaw to be corrected. But when I looked down at the stack of congratulatory emails from colleagues, the contrast was blinding. At work, I was indispensable. At home, I was disposable. That night, I sat at my desk long after the office emptied, staring out at the Chicago skyline. Lights glittered across glass towers, sharp and cold. And I thought, what if I stopped trying to fix them? What if I built something that was mine alone? Let me ask you directly. If someone stormed into your workplace to shame you for setting boundaries, how would you respond? Would you shrink, or would you stand? Share your truth in the comments, because telling our stories is the first step in breaking patterns. For me, that confrontation marked a turning point. My father had invaded my professional sanctuary, tried to drag me back into the old script. But instead of folding, I held my ground. And in the quiet that followed, a radical thought bloomed. Maybe I didn't need their house, their approval, their stage. Maybe I could build my own. The decision that grew from that thought would change everything. Because the next time my family asked for support, I wouldn't just say no. I would build a life without them in it. The idea started as a whisper, a flicker in my chest while I stared at the blinking lights of Chicago. What if I stopped waiting for recognition that would never come? What if I built something that belonged entirely to me? That whisper grew louder 3 weeks after my birthday. I was sitting in a corner cafe laptop, open a slice of carrot cake half-eaten beside me. Across the room, a group of friends surrounded a woman in a paper crown. They laughed as she blew out candles, her friends cheering, "Make a wish, Amanda." I watched the easy affection on their faces, the genuine celebration of her existence. My throat tightened. I realized with the clarity of a stone sinking into water that I would never have this with my family. No promotion, no achievement, no award would ever make them see me. So I typed into the search bar Lakefront Property, Michigan. Listings appeared, dozens of them. My eyes landed on one. A 4-bedroom house with wide windows facing the water, a wraparound deck, tall pine trees swaying in the background. Price $365,000. I clicked through the photos, something expanding in my chest with every swipe. Sunlight on wooden floors, a stone fireplace, a view of the lake that stretched blue and endless. This could be mine, I whispered, my refuge. 2 days later, I stood on that deck in person. The realtor explained the owners had already moved to Arizona. Motivated sellers. I heard myself say, "I'll take it." Her eyebrows lifted. "Don't you want to think about it? Maybe bring your family to see." "No," the word came out sharp clean. "This is for me." The mortgage approval flew through quickly thanks to my excellent credit and that bonus I refused to sacrifice. Signing those papers felt like more than a purchase. Each signature was a declaration of independence, a line drawn across 32 years of invisibility. Mrs. Bennett accompanied me to the closing. She patted my hand as I received the keys. "You're doing the right thing, dear. Sometimes we need to build our own sanctuary." Her words wrapped around me like a blessing. The first weekend at the lake house, I filled the empty rooms with pieces of myself. Awards framed on the walls, photos of moments I was proud of, my college graduation, the Horizon team celebrating after saving the Westridge account, even the magazine cover that featured my PR campaign. Every photo screamed I was here. I mattered. In the master bedroom, I created a space just for me. I hung a small wooden sign on the door, "Birthday Suite." Inside, I placed a reading chair by the window overlooking the lake. On the nightstand, a stack of books I had always wanted to read. On the bed, the softest sheets I could find. On a bright Sunday morning, I drafted invitations to a housewarming. Jennifer, my colleagues, Mrs. Bennett. My finger hovered over my family's contacts, a lifetime of conditioning urging me to include them. But I didn't. I pressed send only to those who had celebrated me, who had seen me clearly. That click was small, but it was momentous. The first stone in the foundation of boundaries I was only beginning to build. Before I move forward, I want to ask you something. What would freedom look like for you? If you could buy one thing, create one space that was yours alone, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. Because claiming that vision is the first step toward building it. For me, freedom looked like a house on a lake, a deck where I could breathe, a door with my name on it. And as the sun set on my first night there, I stood barefoot on the cedar planks, a glass of wine in hand, the lake stretching wide and golden. For the first time in my adult life, I felt powerful. Not because of their approval, not because of their absence, but because I had chosen myself. I didn't know it then, but the photos I would post from that deck would ignite a storm in my family. They would see proof that I no longer needed them, and they would not forgive me for it. The lake house became my sanctuary faster than I imagined. By the end of the first week, curtains hung in every window, the patio furniture stood proudly on the deck, and the walls echoed with laughter from music I played just for myself. For the first time in years, a home reflected me, not my family's expectations, not Miles's shadow, just me. When Saturday arrived, so did my guests. My colleagues from Horizon pulled into the gravel driveway, arms full of housewarming gifts. Jennifer carried a bottle of wine almost as tall as she was. Greg, my boss, brought an expensive Cabernet with a handwritten note, "To celebrating yourself." The words made my throat tighten. We gathered on the deck as the afternoon sun shimmered across Lake Michigan. Someone hooked up a portable speaker, and soon the air was filled with music, laughter, and the sound of clinking glasses. Mrs. Bennet arrived last, her silver hair swept into an elegant bun. She carried a quilt made from blue and green fabric scraps. "For your bedroom," she said, placing it in my arms. "Every home needs something handmade with love." I blinked back tears as she hugged me. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. That night we grilled steaks, roasted corn, and passed plates around the deck while boats drifted across the horizon. I snapped photos of everything: Jennifer laughing so hard she spilled her drink, Mrs. Bennet teaching a coworker how to fold napkins, the sunset, reflecting off the windows in shades of gold and rose. Later, I posted a few of them online, not for validation, but as a statement: this is my life now. A life chosen, not assigned. Within hours, my phone exploded. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, 8 voicemails from my mother in just 15 minutes. The tone grew more frantic with each one. "Where did you get the money for a house? This is irresponsible. Call us back. People are asking questions. Your brother is driving to your office right now." I silenced the ringer, slid the phone into my jeans pocket, and poured myself another glass of wine. The deck glowed under strings of fairy lights. Around me, friends laughed and music played. For once, the world I chose drowned out the world that tried to control me. The next morning, I woke to even more messages. Cousins whispering rumors, aunts questioning my sanity, Miles demanding answers. My father's text landed like a hammer. "Where did you get house money?" Answer immediately. I deleted it. Instead, I flipped pancakes in my new kitchen, the smell of blueberries filling the air. That was when I realized something radical: their chaos no longer had to dictate my peace. Now let me turn to you. If you threw a party without inviting your family, would they notice? Would they rage? Or would they not care at all? Tell me in the comments, because this is where our stories split, when we learn who truly shows up for us. For me, the people who showed up were not bound by blood, but by choice. And the photos from that night told the story louder than words ever could. The Edwards family was absent, but I was not alone. Of course, absence has power. The images I shared online didn't just document joy, they sparked fury. My family wasn't just angry about the house. They were enraged that I had dared to celebrate myself without them, that I had shown the world I could be happy without their approval. And so, as predictable as sunrise, they called for a family meeting, a reckoning. They wanted answers, apologies, and most of all, control. But what they would get instead was evidence. Evidence of 32 years of neglect. And I was ready to present it. The message came on a Monday morning, sharp and cold as the autumn air outside my lake house. "Family emergency meeting tomorrow night. We expect you there. Don't make this worse. No greeting, no choice, just a demand." I read it twice, then set the phone down on the counter beside a stack of unopened boxes. The word expect clung to me. They always expected. They expected silence. They expected obedience. And now they expected $20,000 I had already refused. But this time I would not arrive empty-handed. That night I pulled out 3 heavy photo albums from the back of my closet. I had been keeping them since I was 11, documenting everything, the way a prosecutor collects evidence. Not because I thought anyone would ask to see them, but because I knew one day I would need proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I hadn't imagined the neglect. The first album was too full of Miles. Page after page of birthdays from 6 to 25. Balloons, cakes, wrapped gifts stacked like towers. Professional photography for every milestone. Smiling parents on either side of him. The golden child in every frame. The second album was mine. Empty pages stared back, punctuated by the occasional photo. A blurry image of me alone with a store-bought cupcake. One picture of Mrs. Bennet hugging me on my 30th. A handful of scattered shots, none of them framed by my parents' pride. Whole years of my life, missing, not because I wasn't there, but because no one thought to capture them. The third album contained family vacations, Disney World, the Grand Canyon trips to Europe. My absence was obvious. I hadn't been invited, left behind with Grandma, or told money was too tight to cover everyone. I traced the empty spaces on those pages, my finger catching on the glossy paper. I knew what I held was more than photographs. It was evidence of a pattern. But I didn't stop there. I spent hours at my desk printing records and highlighting lines. A spreadsheet comparing family spending on Miles versus me, college tuition car, down payments, birthday gifts, vacations. The numbers told their own story. Thousands invested in him, scraps thrown at me. At the bottom of the stack, I placed something that still made my chest ache when I read it. A diary entry from when I was 9 years old. Maybe next year they'll remember my birthday without Grandma calling to remind them. The handwriting small and hopeful, as if even then I believed they would change. I set the albums, the spreadsheets, and the diary page into a neat pile. For the first time, I felt less like a forgotten child and more like a lawyer preparing for trial. Tomorrow, the Edwards mansion would be my courtroom. Before I go on, I want to pause and ask you, if you had the chance to prove years of neglect, would you take it? Would you lay out the evidence in front of those who denied your pain? Or would you walk away silently? Share it in the comments, because our answers reveal how we choose to fight back. For me, silence was no longer an option. I had walked out of dinners, ignored voicemails, bought a house without permission. But this meeting, it would be my moment to lay the truth bare. That night, as I packed the albums into a canvas bag, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from anticipation. They thought they were summoning me to shame me into compliance. What they didn't know was that I was walking in, prepared, armed, with 32 years of receipts. The oak doors of that mansion had always been a threshold into their world, a place where my voice was smaller, weaker, drowned out by theirs. But tomorrow night, when I carried those albums across the foyer, I wouldn't be their daughter walking into dinner. I would be their accuser. And for once, they would have to look at what they had done. The next evening, the Edwards mansion loomed before me like a courthouse. Granite steps stretched upward, glowing faintly in the autumn dusk. I clutched the 3 albums tight to my chest knuckles, white against the covers. My breath fogged in the cool air. This time I wasn't here as their daughter desperate for approval. I was here as a prosecutor carrying evidence. The heavy oak door swung open. My father filled the frame, tall and immovable. His eyes dropped to the albums in my arms before flicking back to my face. "You're late," he said, turning without waiting for me to answer. Inside the foyer gleamed with polish, as staged as always. My mother stood there, tissues clutched in her manicured hands. Her eyes were rimmed red makeup, carefully smudged to look tragic but not messy. "Emily," she whispered, her voice breaking on cue. "We've been so worried." I didn't respond. I walked past her into the dining room. The table was set with their best china candles flickering in silver holders. A peace offering or a bribe. Miles and Jessica sat stiffly at the far end, drinks in hand. When Miles saw the albums, his expression faltered, something uncertain crossing his face. I placed the stack on the sideboard. Then I took my usual seat directly opposite my brother, diagonal from my father's throne at the head of the table. Dinner began with the usual choreography, my father serving himself first. My mother chiming in with polite anecdotes, Miles basking in the attention. I barely touched my plate. The food tasted like nothing. I waited. It came after the main course. My father set down his fork with surgical precision, his voice cold and sharp. "Emily, we are concerned about your reckless decision. Buying that house without consulting us reflects poorly on the family. Reckless spending, poor financial planning." My mother dabbed her eyes. "You're breaking our hearts, sweetheart." I pushed my plate away. "Let's cut to the chase. You didn't call this dinner to talk about my house. You called it because I said no." My father's mouth tightened. "It is your duty to contribute to this family. 20,000 from your bonus would—" I stood abruptly, chair legs scraping against hardwood. I lifted the first album and placed it on the table. "Make time," I said. My voice didn't waver. They stared at me stunned. I opened the album to page after page of Miles's birthdays. Towers of presents, cakes, parties with friends. This is Miles, I said, from 6 through 25. Every year celebrated, every detail preserved. I slid the second album forward. This one's mine. My mother opened it. Her fingers trembled as she turned pages filled mostly with emptiness. A few lonely snapshots, a cupcake with one candle, a hug from Mrs. Bennet on my 30th. Whole years missing. There was nothing to put in it, I explained, because there was nothing to photograph. I opened the third album before they could respond. Family vacations, smiling faces at Disney World, the Grand Canyon European tours. But not mine. I wasn't there, I said evenly. I was left with Grandma, or told there wasn't enough money for me. My father slammed his hand against the table. What's the point of this melodrama? The point, I said, pulling out the spreadsheet and laying it on the linen tablecloth, is evidence. Highlighted rows compared spending. Miles's tuition covered in full, mine partially. Cars, down payments, gifts, trips, all weighed heavily in his favor. The numbers don't lie, I said quietly. Finally, I unfolded a diary page, the paper yellowed with age. This is from when I was 9. Maybe next year they'll remember my birthday without Grandma calling to remind them. I wrote that with a child's hope. That hope died a long time ago. The room was silent except for the crackle of candle flames. My mother's tears slipped for real this time. My father's face darkened. Miles stared at a photo I had slid to the edge of the table, him at 8 surrounded by presents, me at 6 in the background, my smile tight and empty. I want to pause here and whisper something to you. What would you do if you had all the evidence, albums, numbers, diaries that proved your family had neglected you? Would you confront them, or would you burn it and walk away? Tell me, because this is the moment where silence or truth splits a life in two. I had chosen truth, and now the weight of 32 years sat heavy on the table in front of them. But the most shocking moment was still to come, because soon my father would say the words I had always known but never heard aloud, and they would change everything. The silence after I placed the last piece of evidence felt endless. My diary page lay open on the linen, ink faded, but words sharp as ever. My parents shifted uncomfortably. Miles avoided my eyes, and I waited. I wanted them to sit in the truth. I wanted them to feel the weight of those empty pages, the weight of every year I had been erased. Finally, my father broke the silence. His chair screeched back as he stood looming over the table. His face flushed red, his jaw clenched. Enough of this melodrama, he barked. You've always been the difficult one, always twisting things to make yourself a victim. I straightened my shoulders. I'm not twisting anything. The proof is right here. Page after page, number after number. You can't deny it anymore. His hand slammed against the table, rattling the silverware. Fine, he shouted, voice booming through the dining room. We favored Miles. He was always the priority. He carries the Edwards legacy. That's what mattered. The words hit the air like a gunshot. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Her tears this time were real. Richard, she whispered, but he kept going. You, he spat, pointing at me. You chose a career in advertising, pretty pictures and slogans. Miles chose finance, real impact. He deserves what he's given. You should be grateful we gave you anything at all. I stared at him, heart pounding. After 32 years, he had finally said it out loud. The truth I had always known but never heard: I was expendable. Miles was not. My mother's shoulders shook. We didn't mean to, she cried. It just happened. And then it became a pattern, and I was easier to ignore. I finished for her. My voice was steady, but inside something crumbled and rebuilt at the same time. Across the table, Miles sat frozen. His drink untouched, his gaze locked on a photograph I had deliberately left near his plate, the one of his 18th birthday. Him grinning beside a car with a giant bow, our parents crying tears of joy. In the background, I was barely visible, clapping half-heartedly, invisible in plain sight. His eyes flicked to me, then away, guilt creeping across his face. I gathered the evidence back into my arms, except for the albums. Those I pushed toward them. Keep them, I said, my voice clear. Consider them a gift, a record of what you chose, a reminder of what you erased. My father's face darkened further. You're ungrateful. You'll regret this. But for once, I didn't feel small under his anger. I felt tall. I felt free. I don't need your approval, I said, rising from my chair. I don't need your love. I don't need your validation. I waited 32 years for you to see me. I'm done waiting. The room exploded with sound, my mother sobbing, my father shouting, Miles calling my name. But I kept walking step by deliberate step until I reached the front door. I paused at the threshold, not turning back. The albums are yours, I repeated. Let them remind you of the daughter you chose not to see. Then I closed the door behind me. The quiet click echoed like thunder. And now I want to bring you into this moment with me. If you heard your father admit out loud that he always favored your sibling, how would you react? Would you crumble, or would you walk out like I did? Tell me in the comments, because these choices define who we become. And if you're new here, subscribe, join this community where we refuse to stay silent any longer. As I drove away from that mansion, the albums no longer weighing me down, I realized something profound. They could deny, deflect, or even admit the truth outright, but none of it mattered anymore. Because I wasn't fighting for their recognition, I was fighting for mine, and for the first time in my life, I was winning. The night air hit me like a rush of cold water as I stepped out of the Edwards mansion. My heels clicked against the granite steps, each one carrying me farther from their table of accusations and tears. Behind me, I could still hear my mother sobbing, my father's angry voice, cutting through the walls, Miles calling after me. But none of it mattered anymore. I had left the albums behind. Proof of 32 years of neglect now sat on their polished dining table, undeniable and permanent. I slid into my car, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on me. I had confronted them. I had laid everything bare, and I had walked away. Not as the forgotten daughter desperate for scraps of attention, but as a woman choosing her own worth. As I drove through the city, streetlights blurred by tears I hadn't realized were falling. They weren't tears of grief. They were tears of release. For the first time, I felt like I had broken free from chains I didn't even know I still wore. Back at the lake house, I stood on the deck, the wood cool beneath my bare feet. The water stretched out in front of me, endless and quiet, reflecting a sky scattered with stars. I wrapped a quilt around my shoulders, the one Mrs. Bennet had given me, and let myself breathe. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. In the weeks that followed, the calls didn't stop. My mother left tearful voicemails every morning at exactly 7:15. Sweetheart, this rebellious phase needs to end. Your father hasn't slept. You're breaking our hearts. I listened once, then started leaving my phone in the bathroom when I made coffee. By the time I finished mascara, her voice would fade into the background, just another noise I didn't have to carry. One afternoon, my father showed up at Horizon again, striding through the lobby like he owned the place. But this time I didn't flinch. I met him at the door, guided him into a private room, and told him firmly, "This conversation is over." I walked out before he could argue. My colleagues watched wide-eyed. For once I wasn't embarrassed. I was proud. And at work, recognition bloomed everywhere. Lawrence praised me openly for saving a $3 million account during a crisis. Colleagues sent congratulatory emails thanking me for leadership that kept clients loyal. Every affirmation reminded me I mattered. Even if my family never admitted it, I was not invisible. Still, there were nights I felt the ache of loss. Blood is a stubborn tie, and walking away cut deep. But then I'd look around the lake house, the sage-green walls I had chosen, the photographs of my achievements framed with care, the laughter of friends echoing off the deck during dinners I hosted. And I'd remember this was worth it. Because leaving didn't mean I had no family. It meant I was finally free to choose who my family was. Jennifer, Mrs. Bennet, my colleagues. The people who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Now let me ask you something. If you finally walked away from the people who never valued you, how would you fill the silence they left behind? Would you let it haunt you, or would you let it heal you? Tell me in the comments, because these are the questions that shape the lives we build. For me, the silence healed. It gave me space to breathe, to grow, to dream bigger than I ever had before. And 1 year later, on my 33rd birthday, that silence would transform into something more powerful, a chorus of voices singing just for me. But before that celebration came, I had to face one final test. Because sometimes the past doesn't let go easily. Sometimes it shows up on your doorstep. A year later, the lake house was alive with color and sound. The deck shimmered in the morning sun, a tray of fresh fruit sat beside a champagne bucket, and 33 candles waited on a cake Jennifer insisted on buying. One for each year she laughed, plus one for luck. I smoothed the skirt of my red sundress, listening to the hum of voices inside. Colleagues from Horizon filled my living room, balancing plates of pastries and glasses of mimosas. Music floated out the open doors, mingling with the lake breeze. Laughter spilled across the deck. For the first time in my adult life, my birthday felt like a celebration, not an afterthought. My phone buzzed with messages, but this time they weren't demands. They were congratulations. Notes from clients, coworkers, even a message from Lawrence announcing my promotion to senior director. The timing felt poetic. One day, after my birthday had been ignored the year before, I was now celebrated both personally and professionally. Jennifer raised her glass, her voice carrying over the crowd. To Emily, the woman who taught us all how to choose ourselves. Glasses clinked and I blinked back tears. And then over the laughter came the sound of a car door slamming. My chest tightened as I recognized it instantly, Miles's BMW. The crowd quieted as he walked onto the deck, a wrapped package clutched in his hands. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. "I'm sorry to crash," he said awkwardly. I wanted to give you this." We hadn't spoken since the night of the photo albums, since his world of privilege had been pierced by evidence he couldn't deny. He looked smaller now, less certain. I surprised myself. "Join us," and I meant it. Later, as the party moved indoors, Miles and I sat side by side at the end of the dock. The lake stretched blue and endless before us, the package resting between us. "Therapy's been eye-opening," he admitted, staring at the horizon. "Dad still won't go, but Mom's trying. She talks about you differently now." "And you?" I asked. "I never saw it until you showed us," he said quietly. "How they erased you while spotlighting me." "I'm sorry, Emily." He pushed the package toward me. "Open it." Inside was a framed photograph restored from a faded negative. Me at 7 years old, perched on a tire swing, laughing at something out of frame. Just me. No Miles, no parents, just proof I existed, joyful and whole. My throat tightened. It wasn't a solution, but it was a beginning. That evening, as twilight draped itself over the lake, another knock came at the door. Through the glass, I saw my mother standing alone. She clutched a small bakery box, her hands trembling. When I opened the door, she held it out. Inside was a single cupcake carrot cake with one candle. "Happy birthday, Emily," she whispered. I remembered. I thought, maybe I could stay for cake. Her smile faltered, fragile but genuine. I stepped aside. "The party's winding down. You can stay." Her relief washed over her face, and for a brief moment, I saw not the actress with perfect pearls, but a woman who was trying, however imperfectly, to begin again. As the last guest drifted home and the candles flickered low, I sat on the dock with a glass of wine. Behind me, the lake house glowed with light laughter still echoing in its walls. Ahead, the water shimmered under the rising moon. I thought of the albums I had left behind, of the child who once wrote, "Maybe next year they'll remember my birthday." And I realized that I no longer needed them to remember. I had remembered myself. And now I want to ask you, listening to my story, what gift have you given yourself that changed everything? Was it a home, a boundary, a moment of courage? Share it below. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because in this space we learn together how to reclaim our worth. For me, the gift was simple and profound, the decision to choose myself. And in that choice, I found not just freedom, but family, the kind built from people who actually show up. The morning after the party, sunlight spilled across the cedar deck, warming the boards beneath my bare feet. The lake was calm, glassy, reflecting a sky brushed in soft gold. I carried a mug of coffee outside and settled into the Adirondack chair I had built myself. The quiet wrapped around me, not heavy like it once was, but gentle like a blanket. For years, silence meant loneliness, forgotten birthdays, empty chairs at crowded tables. But here at the lake house, silence meant peace. It meant freedom. It meant I could finally hear my own voice above the noise of expectations. Inside the remnants of last night lingered half-empty wine glasses, ribbons from opened gifts, the faint echo of laughter still clinging to the air. Proof that I was not alone. Proof that when I chose myself, others chose me too. I thought of Miles's photograph of me at 7 carefree on a tire swing. I thought of my mother's trembling hands offering a single cupcake. Imperfect gestures, but gestures nonetheless. Maybe the past couldn't be rewritten, but the future that was mine to design. I raised my coffee toward the horizon, as if toasting the girl I used to be, the one who waited year after year for someone else to see her. And then I toasted the woman I had become, the one who finally chose to see herself. Because in the end, the greatest gift wasn't the house, the title, or even the celebration. The greatest gift was learning that validation begins within. And once you learn that, no one can take it away.